Hello, my beautiful motorheads. Welcome to Féroce, where we inspire you to live fiercely. I'm your host, Annick, and today there is no guest. It's just me here to talk to you. As you can see, I'm not in the studio today. I'm out in the wild. I've been out riding all day, and I've been on this Honda Scrambler 500. It is not my bike, and I am not sponsored by Honda, but I am test riding it. That brings up the point of, if anybody would like to sponsor the show, I would love that and appreciate it. If you're interested in sponsoring, it'll allow me to get fancier with my setup. It'll allow me to do a little bit more creative things that I have in mind, but just am not able to do at this point in the show, which is at its beginning. So if you are interested in sponsoring, or you know somebody who might want to sponsor, you can reach me at info@liveferoce.com. It'll be in the show notes, but it's spelled LIVEFEROCE.com. Now that we got that out of the way, I've been on the Scrambler and it's been super fun. I typically ride any motorcycle that I test 500 to 1,000 miles if I can. Typically, I'm allowed to have a bike for an extended amount of time, in which case I will just ride it everywhere. I'll go to the post office, I'll go to the grocery store, I'll take it on the awesome twisties in this area. I'll take it on the highway, if it can go on the highway, and just basically put it through its paces. And in this case, like take it a little bit off-road. Not much. I would say this is more like, fire road riding for the most part. That being said, today was not about talking about this bike or any bike in particular. What I wanted to talk about was the idea of riding in general. This came up because, as you can kind of see behind me, it's fall in the Northeast. The weather was super hot and warm last week, and now it's just starting to turn and get down to the 30s and freezing at night. What this is sparking is the sheer panic from people of, oh my God, I didn't ride enough this season, or oh my gosh, like, are you available and can you go ride? Well, it's kind of funny, because you had the whole season to ride, which is totally cool. And I think that sometimes we just need to recognize that in certain parts of life, you may not have the time to ride as much as you did another year or in a different, quote, season of your life. And that's fine. It doesn't mean that you're not a rider. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, that you didn't put in a set amount of miles. Life happens, and there are just some years where you ride a lot and some years that you don't. This has been on my mind. I had gone to a local bike night, and I was hanging out, and an older gentleman came over and he started chatting me up. And he was like, he goes, I'm so happy to be here. There's all these people that are riding. He goes, and I don't have anybody to ride with. So I find myself just riding less and less every year. And I listened to him and I was thinking about it. And I thought about how, what is your riding style? For me, I have a few different scenarios, but mostly I ride alone. I think that motorcycling inherently is a lone wolf sport. And I stumbled over that. Lone wolf sport. It's a lone wolf sport. Okay. So for the most part, you're on the bike by yourself unless you do have a passenger on the back. I haven't had anybody on the back of my bike in years and years and years and years. And it for sure was never an extended amount of time. But I know that, some of the guys who ride, they like to bring a partner along with them, and vice versa. It doesn't matter what the situation is. But for the most part, when you're on the bike, you are alone because you're riding on the bike, even if you are with other people. The older I get, the less I want to ride with other people. And I think a lot of it has to do is that when you first start riding, you're so excited about it that you want to share riding with other people and experience it, and, share your thoughts of, it was like this, and you see that, and we're both starting off, and it's awesome. And then as the years go by, you start to find that it becomes increasingly hard to find people to ride with. What would bum me out is to think that anybody isn't riding because they just don't have somebody to ride with, right? Like I know a lot of people don't like to do things alone. People oftentimes don't like to eat in restaurants by themselves. I traveled for years for work, and I ate most of my meals alone, and you get over it. It's like it's not a big deal, but I do know that for some people, it can be a little bit of a barrier. Now, I love riding alone, and it is for me a time of contemplation. It's a time for me to just go out and do my thing. If I do ride alone, the best thing about it is that I don't have to wait for anybody. I can go whenever I want, at whatever time I want, wherever I want, stop whenever I want, and I don't have to listen to anybody else complain. Which is not always the case at all. The second best scenario for me in riding is when I ride with my BFF. And after so many years, it's probably been about 20 years that we've ridden together, it's simpatico, it's easy. This person I just call up, we go out, we know each other's riding style. We also use Bluetooth. I have a Shoei Neotech with the Senna Bluetooth in there. So we will talk to each other while we're riding. And it's fun because I enjoy this person's company. And again, we have similar interests and it is super funny. Like some of the conversations are just hilarious and I enjoy it and they do as well. Now, I have heard that some people don't like to use the intercom system because they don't want to talk to their partner or whoever they're riding with. Think about that. I often want to say to those people, do you really want to be in that relationship? And do you want to be hanging out with that person if you don't want to talk to them? Not judging, sort of judging. Maybe questioning might be the more appropriate thing to say. The other part to that is I do understand that you can also just want to be with somebody and not have somebody in your ear talking. But for the most part, it actually has eased a lot of technical issues while riding, such as if you get separated by accident or somebody turned off and you couldn't see them, that you can keep each other updated. Hey, I got to get gas, just pulled into this place, or I want to circle back. There was something that I wanted to see, or do you see that road? Maybe we can, diverge from our route and go check that out. So cool stuff like that. The third scenario for me is I will ride with a maximum of 6 people. Preferably for me, it's 4 people on bikes, including myself. And I have a small group in my area that if it works out, we ride together at least once a year, hopefully. And it's great. We're all on about the same bikes, sort of. If we decide to go do an ADV ride, we're all on bikes that can work in that scenario. And they will run from 1,000 cc down to my itty bitty 250 that I ride. Anyway, they're easy to ride with. It's not a big deal. I think that's the key. That's going to be like the overarching key, is to find people who aren't annoying and you have similar riding styles. I would say that we're hardcore riders and we hadn't seen each other in a while. So one person couldn't go on this ride, but the 3 of us went. And in the middle of the ride, we ended up at a place where we ended up getting a charcuterie board and just hanging out and bullshitting for an hour, maybe even 2. And I have to say, what I realized was after that ride that we really needed it. There's sometimes like you think you're going to go out and you just want to ride hardcore. And what ended up happening was that we just needed to catch up and update each other on what was going on in life and explore a new area, which we did. We didn't end up riding that many miles. There was a ton of traffic in the area, unfortunately, because of the leaf peeping season. But I was so appreciative of spending that time with my friends that it just didn't even matter. The last scenario for me, which I've been doing for the past couple of years, is I started riding with my cousin and cousin-in-law. They're 2 up on a Harley. And it's a completely different riding style for me. With some of my other friends, they are much more aggressive, fast riders. And then with my cousin, these guys they go out and they ride. Oh my goodness. This one day I started off and I left my house at 8:30 in the morning and I didn't get to my destination until 10 o'clock at night and they got home at 10:30. We crossed 4 states and just had a ball. It was, they basically sort of ride around the speed limit and they just go and go and go. And they're really good at taking breaks, especially because they're 2 up. So my cousin, who's the passenger, she will just need to get off and take a break, which I totally appreciate because I'm typically on the small bike and I will take any opportunity to take a break because it's hard to be on a small bike for a really long time. So that's been really fun. And it's been a different experience for me to do these much longer street rides. Typically, if I do ride with my aggressive friends, we're either doing ADV riding, so it's very physical. It's either you're doing some off-road, you're on the street, or we're just riding perhaps as fast as we possibly can in certain scenarios and enjoying that, but it's physically hard. So after a few hours, you're like, okay, I'm done. Are we good? Yeah, we're good. All right, let's go. So it's totally different. I do not enjoy large group riding. I have been invited to several runs, I guess you call them. Like a lot of clubs like to have these runs where they will try to get a lot of people to come out, because the more people that go on these runs, they will donate, and it's a great way to raise money. It's also very social. Again, the lone wolf thing. I love people. Obviously, I'm doing this, and the whole premise of having this podcast is to connect the motorcycle community and make it a lot smaller so that everybody can get to know each other, because really we're all connected. And whether, it's by one or two or three people, probably everyone in the world who rides is connected to someone. These large group rides, I don't particularly like them because it is typically complete chaos, and as well managed as they are, you're always going to get the yahoos, and it's these people who think they know how to ride better than they actually do, or they don't have much experience riding in formation, which is what you need when you're in a large group ride to stay safe and to make the ride enjoyable for everybody, but also to interact with the public who you're riding through. So there's always some type of chaos, and sometimes there's accidents, and I just don't like to put myself in that kind of situation. I typically, in these scenarios, will try to be towards the end of the pack, but sometimes if there's like 100 people on these rides, you are just where you are, and that's that. There have been other times where I have volunteered to be part of perhaps like a women's ride, where we might do a bit of an ADV ride, so on off-road again. I will typically ride sweep, and it's called sweep because it's the last person in the ride, and they are responsible for all the riders ahead of them, in that if something happens, the rest of the group can continue on, and then the sweep position is to come up and address the situation, whether it's a broken down bike, and in the worst case scenario, that it is an accident. Now, I would say that I'm kind of a relaxed sweep, in that I'm not the person that goes out with a full first aid kit anticipating of the worst in a scenario. I don't think that that's necessarily, it's always good to be prepared, but I don't think it's good to go out with a mindset that something tragic is going to happen. For the most part, in these scenarios where I've ridden, we have not been so far from civilization that a phone call wouldn't get a paramedic or help within a reasonable amount of time. Now, I also ride sweep on just for the sheer thing is like, also just don't want to be caught behind somebody who is maybe riding in a situation that's going to put me in danger. Actually, let me back up. I would prefer to be behind somebody who might put me in a position of danger, because I know what my reflexes are and I know what my riding capabilities are, so I can, for the most part, navigate a situation that might arise. What I don't like is being in front of somebody who thinks they are a better rider than they are and is riding aggressively, or puts me in a bad situation because of a mistake they made. If I don't know the people riding with me well, then I would prefer to be behind them than in front of them. Now, this other group that I go with and ride with, I don't care where I am in the pack. I typically am in the back just because I'm on the smallest bike. I trust their riding, and when I said that I talked about riding with my BFF, we literally could ride right next to each other and it would be fine, because I know this person's capabilities of riding and they're an excellent rider, so it has never been an issue. This goes back to riding. I have seen over the years, or like this gentleman was talking to me at the bike night, how can I find more people to ride with? Well, you have to put yourself out there. Kind of a tough thing, but it's a lot easier now than it was back when I first started riding, before there was social media. Now there's a lot of meetup groups. You can get into some just motorcycling groups that have a common interest, whether that's a specific bike you ride, like a sport bike or a cruiser, or you're female and you want to ride with other women, or you want to do track days, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's much easier. I have had a lot of success over the years, and I know that this has a lot to do with my personality, that I have been able to make people be friends with me. And I'll give a couple of scenarios, because in interviewing people for the show, in reminiscing or them telling me specific stories, it has actually brought up stories or memories for myself of specific incidences of meeting people. One of the people that was on the show earlier was C. Jane Taylor, and we mentioned that we met at a Babes Ride Out. I had decided that I was going to go to this Babes Ride Out because I had heard about them, and I was going to write an article for a magazine that I was writing for at the time. The best thing that come out of this event was that I met C. Jane, and it was great. I showed up to the party late, basically, and I rolled up and I was like, walked into like this social area. I was just kind of like looking around, like, oh, I kind of wonder what's going on. And I happened to be standing next to C. Jane, and she also was standing there by herself. So I struck up a conversation with her. And as you can see from the episode, if you do watch it, she's episode 4. She also is outgoing and personable. So it's kind of hard not to strike up a conversation with her, which we did. And we ended up having a lot in common. And we decided, because this isn't always the case, like you might just meet somebody and then you never talk to them again. But we exchanged information and we ended up later on working together, and not only on a project, and not only that, but also have, it's, for me, it's been a joy to just see her write her book and do these cross-country trips and then be on her second book. And, it's just cool. She's a cool chick. I mean, listen, you watch the episode, you'll understand what I'm saying. So I will make people just be friends with me. And I have, over the years, done this many times. Another time was that I used to live in New York City, and before I hosted my own bike night at Bar Matchless, which some people might know of, I would also go to the other motorcycle events. And there used to be this place called The Ear, which I believe closed down, but I'll actually have to check that out and see. Anyway, The Ear it was a bar, and it had bike night for years and years and years and years and years. And they always had a great showing, whether it was a summer, winter, fall, it didn't matter. It could be 30 degrees out and people would invariably show up. I was great at going to that event and picking people up on the street. Literally, if somebody was like looking at my bike, I would walk up to them and be like, hi, and bonus points if they were cute. So this one event, which hopefully I'll be able to get him on the podcast, was this gentleman named Johnny Iuzzini, who is a world-renowned pastry chef. And that night was awesome because he was checking on my bike and I saw him from afar and I was like, he looks cool. I mean, this guy's always had style, right? He also rode a Ducati at the time and he's just a cool guy. So I walked up to him and I was like, hi, introduced myself. And he was like, oh, my friend Shea Galante and I are going to go over to Wiley DeFresny's WD, it's not 40. That's the oil. Anyway, they were going to go see their famous chef friend, and they were like, would you like to join us? And how could I say no? So I ended up hanging out with these guys, becoming friends with them, and I got to have this incredible behind-the-scenes experience at this top New York City restaurant with these guys who rode, and Johnny and I became lifelong friends, and that was the moment in time where we met. So I'll always look on that fondly, and had I not gone up and spoken to him, I would never have been friends with him, right? Just kind of put myself out there, which you never know. I have gone up to a lot of people over the years, and they're just like, hey, or they just ignore me and they walk away. But if you don't leave the house, you're never going to meet anyone. And if you don't leave the house, you're never going to find anybody to ride with, or you're also just never going to ride. And in this day and age, it is super easy not to leave your house. It's, we're in a time and place where people just are not connecting. And again, it goes back to the reason why I wanted to do this podcast. That is my take on riding. I also I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of the episodes that we covered already that have aired. So we had Jane, which I talked about, and then we also had John Flores, who also talked about riding, and everybody in there, pretty much in their episodes is going to talk about riding, right? It's about motorcycling, so great. Even though we all ride, we all have different perspectives or different experiences that have happened. And one of the things that I like that John Flores talked about when he was talking about crossing the transcontinental highway was that he talked about being on the electric motorcycle. At a certain point, He was in more of a desert open area, and it was silent because the bike was silent, and he got to experience this profound, he got to have a profound experience. I guess that would be maybe the better way to say it. And I thought that was really cool. John Flores and I started riding around the same time. He probably started maybe 6 months before me. And then we got put into contact with each other and started riding together because there weren't that many people that wanted to ride with new riders. Now look at us 25, 30 years later, and our riding careers have taken somewhat similar paths in that we both kind of got into some journalism. I would say that John Flores has definitely taken far cooler trips than I have at this point, but I hope to catch up with him. He's very inspiring in that aspect. Chris Cosentino talked about racing, which I raced with Chris, and that was awesome. Racing is a whole other experience, and I'm happy that I had that. Chris brought up that a lot of the thing about racing is the camaraderie and what happens behind the scenes when you're waiting for hours in between your races, when you are wrenching on the weekends and nights on your bike to make it roadworthy, or in Chris's case, where he is building a bike from scratch, which is just awesome and amazing. And he talked about Barber and being down in Barber, and I got to see some of the follow-up photos, so you should check out his social media because that was pretty cool. They rode the bike. Eli Block, yeah, I think that's the gentleman's name, is the racer who rode his bike down at Barber, and there were some really cool shots of finally seeing the Hypermono on the track at Barber. Now, speaking of Barber, it made me think about two things, which is one, pretty soon in some upcoming episodes, we are going to have somebody who is from Barber on the podcast to interview. So I'm gonna wait. I'm not gonna say who it is, but I'm very excited about that interview because I've had some really cool experiences also with this person out riding and doing some cool events. Barber. Well, I feel like I need to talk about the Barber Museum. So I'm totally going to go off topic on this, but I think it's a good story, and I do want to share it because it was one of those things where I'm like, man, it's so cool that I got to do this. So years ago, I was traveling for work. I had worked for a company that was a startup, and we got bought out by a larger company. And I got hired on with a new company, and I had to do extensive traveling to promote the brand, do a lot of trainings within the company, and teach people how to sell the product that we had. So I had to be on the road. It was like 80% of the time, and especially in the beginning when we got bought out and we're doing this transfer, it was every week. And it was not uncommon for me to be on 2 to 6 flights during the week going to various places. Needless to say, I was pretty burnt out by doing this. It was 14-hour days. You're talking all day. You're training people. It was a lot. So I was at an event in Birmingham, Alabama, which is where the Barber Museum is. And I showed up, and there was this local regional territory sales manager who was just such a Southern gentleman. His name is Stephen Hayes, and I'm going to shout out to him for what he was able to do for me. Stephen and I were talking. I said, Stephen, have you ever been to this place called the Barber Museum in Birmingham, Alabama? And you live here. Have you been there? And he's like, well, no, I don't reckon I ever have been there. And I'll stop there in doing a Southern accent because I don't want to insult anybody. But as a Northerner, I love a good Southern accent. I was like, it's supposed to be amazing. I have not had the opportunity to go. Everybody that I know has been there. They've either raced there or they've been to the museum, which it was off season. But I was like, I really want to go to the museum. So Stephen, in his calm Southern ways, like had this look on his face. He goes, well, what if I could get you there? And I was like, well, I don't know. I got a lot to do this week with these presentations and training your guys and all this stuff. He goes, let me see what I can do. So he set it up so that I could take his car, and after my presentation, hightail it over to the Barber Museum and go check it out. And then I would be able to be back in time for an important dinner that we had that evening. I will forever be thankful to Stephen Hayes, which is why I'm going to repeat his name over and over again, even though he doesn't ride, but hopefully somebody in Birmingham, Alabama can tell him that after all these years, I truly appreciate what he did for me. I took his car, drive over, and I drive up, and there's no one around because, again, it was off season. There wasn't an event going on, and it was during the week. And I have to say, I was super lucky because of that, because there was nobody there. So I walk in, pay my ticket, and really it's walking into the museum, which is incredible. And I hope that if you have any interest in this, that you take a look. Whoever designed the museum did such an incredible job. It is, as a designer, I have true appreciation for the architecture and what they did to display all the bikes. The only other show that I've ever seen in my life that I thought was equally impressive is when the Guggenheim Museum had in, I think it was 1999, a motorcycle show that was just incredible. And that was in the Frank Lloyd Wright Guggenheim Museum in New York City, which is a spiral. It was the perfect venue to have a motorcycle retrospective, because that spiral that you could ride up the motorcycles, and the bikes seemed like they were in the most perfect space to be on display. Now I go to the Barber Museum and I walk in, and it was like the heavens had parted. Unbelievable the way that they had these bikes displayed. They're stacked on top of each other. There's full F1 Formula cars adhered to the wall. It is like the Mecca. So I'm just saying, if you ever have the opportunity, do yourself a favor and go over to the museum. No one was there. And I'm walking around and I'm just like, my head is on a swivel, and I cannot believe I am seeing everything that I've ever wanted to see in my life. They have vintage bikes. They have modern bikes. They have racing pedigree bikes that were retired. You walk up to the different floors, and the museum is situated on the track there, which is a world-class track. And if you were in the museum and there was a race going on, you would have the perfect bird's eye view of the track. I mean, it is spectacular. Well, we'll take a break as we wait for this truck to do its thing nearby. You think you're off in the woods, but it still ends up that you're like close to civilization here, so go figure. So you're in Mecca, and there's every imaginable motorcycle that you could have ever wanted to see, except for one. And that bike is the John Britton V1000 that I wanted to see. I have seen it one other time in my life. It was a private collector who had shown up when I raced. I just had it in the paddocks and was having it out for a display, but not racing it. It's a very, very special bike. John Britton passed away in 1995 from cancer, but he had designed and built a motorcycle that won, I think it came in either second or third at the Battle of the Twins in Daytona. It was a remarkable bike because it was it was a privateer's design and build, and then the bike was so good that it won. It also has these like crazy, from a design perspective, it's very cool, and the design still holds up. It doesn't look dated, even slightly dated, but not overly dated from the 90s. The only thing that gives it up is that it's got these very cool 90s colors of a blue that leans towards purple with purple and pink accents, which is very 90s and happens to be right back in style right now, so go figure. I'm at the museum. I cannot find the Britton there anywhere, and I was pretty certain that they had it in their collection. So I stopped somebody who works at the museum, and I was like, hey, did I miss the John Britton? Because I believe that you do have it here in the museum, but I haven't seen it. And the person said to me, hold on, let me go ask, and I'll get back to you. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. You don't often get to talk to people at the museum. The person comes back to me and says, we do have a John Britton, but it's actually on the top floor, and we're getting ready for a private event, and they put it up there for the private event. And I was like, oh. He goes, however, you are more than welcome to go up and look at it. You can take the elevator. He goes, when you get off the elevator, if anybody stops you, he's like, just tell them that you have special permission to go look at the John Britton bike. Couldn't believe it. I was like, okay. Got in that elevator straight away, rode to the top, and I come out on the top floor, and indeed they were setting up for an event. They had all the tables. It must have been a gala of some type. There were people bustling around. The caterers were getting things set up. And I look over, and there it is, the Britton motorcycle. And I was super psyched. I got up close. There was no one around, no one to stop me from getting my nose, inches away from it. I did not touch it because I'm respectful like that. And I got to take as much time as I wanted to check it out. And it was a very cool and precious experience. I commend the Barber Museum for allowing people to do that kind of thing. And I don't know if I got lucky and it was a time and place, but these are the type of things that I have been super lucky in my life to experience. And I appreciate it so much. It goes a long way. And I can say that, after all these years, I still think about that as a very special experience. And as somebody who was completely burnt out, tired, and just wanted to be home, to be able to have this really special experience, I will never forget. So thank you to the Barber Museum. And again, thank you to Mr. Stephen Hayes in Birmingham, Alabama, who loaned me his car and set it up so that I could leave what I needed to do, totally covered my back, and allowed me to go do that really cool side trip. I'm excited to talk to this person from the Barber Museum and talk a little bit about their collection. People on podcasts always use that term, I'm so excited, and it literally drives me bonkers, but I'm looking forward to having this guest on the show, and I know that it will be good. I have been fortunate and love that I'm able to start getting guests from around the world. Again, like I said, that the motorcycle world is small, and we're connected, and we're even more so connected via social media, and having the ability to get to know people via some of these social media apps, which are a blessing, and then they also are a curse. And that leads me into, if you are not yet subscribed, please subscribe and like on whatever platform you are watching or listening to this right now. I like YouTube the best because it allows people to see the facial expressions, and I have had some dynamic people on already who are, their facial expressions are worth a million words, and like how excited they got. At one point, Chris Cosentino got so excited about talking about his bike that he kept slamming the table because he was so excited and he kept doing this. And I had to literally stop him because the camera kept moving down to a point where it was just pointed in whatever direction. So, the fact that he gets so excited about what he's talking about, like you can't hide that, and you can hear it in somebody's voice, obviously, but it is cool to be able to see that and to connect on that level with people. And also then if you see these people, you're in South Africa and you see the bearded Fen, you're gonna be like, man, that guy looks so familiar. Why does he look so familiar? Oh, right, he was on Annick's podcast. Féroce, awesome, cool. And then you can go up and say hi and tell him how you recognized him, because that's pretty neat, right? But that goes back to, if you can subscribe and like, it helps me, because it is literally the free way that you can support the show. It ends up, the one thing that I was not particularly prepared for when I did this show was actually how much everything costs, because people don't really talk about that, and it ends up, all of it costs money. So who knew? I knew it was going to cost some money, but maybe not as much as it actually is costing, which is, fine. This is absolutely a passion project. It would be great to have it pay for itself, and even better, like I said earlier, if I could get sponsorship, that it would allow me to creatively do things. I have a vision for this show to be something, and I would love to be able to make that happen. If I have to do that myself, it's just going to be a slow roll as I build it up over time, and that's totally fine. If anybody would love to be a part of that and help me out with it, it would also be cool. In the meantime, if you can do none of the above and just appreciate the content, that means the world to me. And the only way that I know that you like the content is if you click subscribe and like. I'm still gonna have to say that probably every episode, so buckle up and get ready, because you're gonna hear me asking for subscribe and likes, because that's what we do these days. So beyond that, I want to circle back to what I originally was talking about, was the riding. And I will say that, I went out and rode today in particular because I need to exercise this motorcycle behind me and see what it's made of, and then do my review on it. So part of me had to be forced to go out and ride today, but let's be honest. I mean, the sun is shining. It's getting much cooler out. We maybe have another week of riding. Oh, which led me to say earlier that I wanted to talk about, which was this end of season push where everybody comes out of the woodwork because they get nervous that they're losing out on the season and they want to get in as many miles as possible. Well, I will say that if you wait for people to do that, you are going to be waiting a long time, because as I've come to realize in life, especially at this point, people use the term that they're busy, And I don't agree with that. I do think that people are distracted, and it would be a shame for you not to reach out to someone because they're not getting back to you, to try to reach out to them more than once. And I'll say this because one of the people that I did ride with, she was like, nobody, sets up rides except me, and was lamenting, that it's a hassle to get other people to ride. And I said to her, I go, actually, I reached out to you twice in the springtime to ride, and both times you were too busy to ride. And she paused, and I could see it. She was like, click, 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 click. Oh, shit, right? And what I couldn't realize is, like, you can't take that personally. I was not insulted that she had forgotten. I know that she gets distracted and is, quote, busy. The reason why I don't like to say that people are busy, because honestly, we make time for the things that we want to do, and we are all busy, and really, are we as busy as we think we are? Or are we distracted by things that we think are more important? Or are we distracted and numbing out by scrolling on social media, watching other people ride and doing the things that we want to do? So I want to strongly encourage everybody listening to go out and do the thing that you want to do. I am giving myself this message as I say it out loud, because I also feel that oftentimes I will not go do. I'm guilty of this as well, but I'm working hard for it to not be a thing in my life, but to actually go out and do the thing, whether that is riding. And if you don't ride and you're listening to this podcast, I love and appreciate you even more, because I think that there's a lot that you can get from these stories that people are sharing, and hopefully even perhaps what I'm saying today about riding and going out and doing the thing, that whether it's getting that workout in, going for that walk, finding that place, making the art, doing that small project that you wanted to do, and not waiting for other people to do that. If people want to join you, that's great. I also find that oftentimes when we start doing the thing, it's incredible who shows up. So I encourage you today, go ride, and don't let this beautiful weather go to waste. Even if it's maybe not the best of weather, go out if you want to. And if you don't want to ride, maybe just go see your bike and pet it, because your bike needs love as well. That's it, my friends. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love feedback. So please leave comments. I appreciate everything. I will not tolerate meanness, but constructive feedback, absolutely, 100%. Let me know what I can do better. Let me know if this topic resonates with you. Let me know if you even like an episode where I don't have a guest and I'm just flying solo out in the wild, doing a thing. And as always, ride smart. Ciao.